In the late 1960s, the American Motors Corporation was the underdog of underdogs. They were not Ford, they weren't GM, they weren't even Chrysler. And yet, for a brief but glorious moment, they aimed higher than any of the big three ever dared. For an American brand, dethroning the Corvette would have been quite the achievement. But AMC wanted to make a bigger splash than that. They wanted to create a true world beater. A mid-nine supercar was what they set out to build, one with the kind of exotic presence that you'd expect to see parked outside a Monte Carlo casino, not an AMC showroom. And at first glance, you'd assume it came from Italy, because in a way it did. The chassis was engineered by none other than Giotto Bizzarini, the same man who helped build the Ferrari 250 GTO and Lamborghini's first V12. But under the body, those were all American, penned by Rich Teague, AMC's design chief. It was the ultimate Italian-American hybrid, and for a brief moment in time it was real, and then it was gone. This is the story of the AMC AMX 3, America's greatest supercar that you've probably never heard of. This story begins in 1967, when AMC was looking for a halo car to bring in new buyers. Long seen as a seller of boring family cars, they were spitting up several sportier models at the time, including what would eventually become the Javelin. They were trying to improve their image and draw in a much more youthful and exciting customer base, which would be a total 180 for the brand. They decided that a European-inspired halo car might be the secret weapon that they needed to really shift public perception. So, they turned to Richard Teague, a master of doing more with less. Teague and his in-house design team at AMC were tasked with creating a full-size concept, a mid-engined European-style supercar like nothing the company had ever attempted before. But they weren't the only ones working on this. Giorgetto Giugiaro of Ital Design was also commissioned to produce a competing design study. AMC was to choose the winner, and in the end the internal team led by Teague won. And the design and engineering work then began on what would eventually become the AMX3, with loads of brilliant other people hired on board to provide their expertise. Even though Ital Design lost the initial design competition, they were also working on this project to help finalize and see through Teague's vision. Giotto Bizzarini of Ferrari and Lamborghini fame was also on board for parts of the suspension and other bits of chassis engineering. Salvatore Diamonte's company, which I will try not to butcher, called Autocostruzione, was on board for fabrication. Heck, even BMW was brought into the fold for testing, and they each ended up having a bigger role than AMC imagined. All in all, the American Motors Corporation spent about $2 million on this effort, but the result was what Bizzarini called the best car I've ever built in terms of mechanical components and road holding, which is high praise from the automotive grandmaster that he was. Powering this creation would be AMC's very own 390 cubic-inch V8, the same engine found in the AMX Super Talk 390 cars, and soon to appear in the mighty Rambler machine. It was a proper American bruiser fed by a Carter 4-barrel carburetor, running at a 10-to-1 compression ratio and delivering 340 horsepower at 5,100 RPM, along with a thunderous 430 foot-pound of torque at just 3,600 RPM. In a car that only weighed about 3,300 pounds, that meant some serious speed. The car's effective 22,570 R15 tires struggled to contain the power, but they got the job done. The AMX3 could launch from 0 to 60 in about 5.5 seconds and push a top speed somewhere between 160 and 170 miles per hour, depending on how that front end was shaped for aerodynamics. Bizzarini, who was the ever-perfectionist, took one of these early AMC prototypes to Monza to extract every last drop of performance that he could from the setup. And it wasn't long before AMC started eyeing even a larger engine for a production version, a 401. If that had made it to the street, then the numbers that we might have seen in an AMX3 road car would have been even more staggering. Underneath that bodywork, though, this engineering was just as serious. The AMX3 rode on a highly responsive, independent suspension setup that was tuned for really good handling and awesome high-speed stability. Braking was handled by a four-wheel disc brake setup, and the gearbox was a four-speed manual built by none other than Automotive, an Italian company that was better known for building tanks and naval guns than transmissions. So, it's safe to say that this four-speed box was probably stronger than your average T5. Now, originally, Bizzarini had looked at the standard ZDF transaxle, but that would be too long to fit in this car's tight mid-E9 layout. So, he convinced Melara to build their own transaxle for this vehicle, and the first prototypes for the AMX3 were completed right around 1969.